Good evening. This is Scott Silverstein, and I am the moderator tonight for Democracy is Everyone's first Hangout on Air, promoting the hashtag HBG Thriving Together. Now, I want to acknowledge something before we begin the show. We are using the wrong hashtag in all the promotional content. All the promotional content says HBG Striving Together. So we're going to make a correction with that, and that's what I love about digital. You can correct your mistakes. There's no obsolete content. And I'm a former printer, so I know what you can correct and what you can't correct, and that's the beauty of digital. I just want to introduce our two guests, and our first guest is a Harrisburg advocate, Rhonda Mays. Rhonda, say something.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. And I'm looking forward to a very interesting and stimulating conversation with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda, and thank you for coming into the Hangout. And our second guest is Nevin Mindlin, and I'm sure everyone knows Nevin Mindlin. He's also a Harrisburg advocate. Nevin, say something.
Good evening. It's good to see you all. It's nice to be a part of this. We did this a little while back, and I'm glad we're back on the air again, starting the conversation with the folks in Harrisburg.
Yeah, one of the observations that I had a few days ago at the Zembo, where we had over 60 organizations. There was so much passion in the room and excitement that broke up into a number of breakout sessions where they were talking about what they needed to get done and what they were up to with respect to the city of Harrisburg. And Nevin, I want to thank you for inviting me to come down there, and it was just a tremendous experience to see 60 organizations collaborating to take action.
I'd like to say that there were two organizations that helped pull that together. One was City Beautiful 2.0, and the other was Clean and Green Harrisburg, both of which are sort of umbrella organizations that are trying to bring folks in Harrisburg together. And as we got together and talked with each other, we decided it was really critical to begin a conversation that was a positive conversation. And I was glad that you were able to get there, Scott, because I think that it was just such a marvelous room full of so much energy, so much positive energy.
But what struck me afterwards is what the question was. There was something missing there. It was clear after you left when you asked, well, what was missing and what was needed? And on that question, I'm going to you, Nevin.
Well, I think that clearly was a beginning, and I think it was understood to be a beginning. And one of the things we wanted to make sure that happened in that room was that we were not looking backward, we were looking forward. Nobody was interested in having a conversation about what went wrong. Nobody was interested in pointing a finger at anybody. Everybody was in that room because they wanted to work together to try to begin to solve problems in a very positive way. And we've just begun. In a short time, there'll be emails that will go out to everybody who participated or who registered. We're going to have another meeting of everybody that we can pull back into a room sometime beginning of June. But there's a lot of conversation that has to take place and a lot of work that needs to be done. This is very action-oriented. And so that's the work that's beginning, and that's what people really are looking forward to. And so there'll be those of us who will try to facilitate that. And this is part of the, I think, something that could be helpful in in that facilitation.
But Nevin, you made the remark, which really struck in my mind. There was only one news service there. And I don't think anything that night got on to the public airwaves. So my question is, how do you get to the action without the news?
Well, that's why we're here, in part. I think everybody showed up because we use social media. We use social media through email, through Facebook, through Twitter, through Google. We used every means we could to reach out to people. And I think that we can have a conversation without relying on the commercial media. They've got their own axes to grind. And there were a couple in the room that paid no attention to us, and they were there from the media.
Right. What was your experience, Rhonda?
Well, some people may know I have a recent column with the Patriot News. So, but I wasn't there as a Patriot News columnist. I was there as a concerned citizen and a resident, and someone that wanted to be involved with, some of the solutions to the problems that we face in the city. I wasn't really looking for the media there. I didn't really notice whether they were there or not. What I was really looking at were the organizations. As you pointed out, Scott, there are over 60 organizations that were there, and I would imagine that every one of those organizations, there's multiple people there that are able to get out the word about significant meetings and forums such as this that are happening throughout the city when they do happen, and being able to keep us all in connection with each other and able to stay in contact with each other to keep on making forward progress. As Nevin pointed out, for various reasons, we can't always look towards what they call the mainstream media or the traditional media forms for getting out information and the word about what's happening in the city. Fortunately, we're in a day and age, and you say the digital age, where we really don't need to use those methods. We're not relying on those methods as much as we used to. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, and by the way, there were about 120 some people in the room, 60 of whom were there representing organizations, and very many of the others are associated with one or the other, a number of those organizations. And there were also a good number of people who were there just as individual citizens who want to connect and be a part of something positive. When I came to the meeting that evening, I had just had a conversation earlier in the day with a woman who actually lives not too far from here. Her name is Sandy Hauerbach, and she's the director for the National Coalition for Dialogue and Deliberation. The reason I got a hold of her was because she had a great quote, and I want to share it because I think it sort of picks the whole thing and puts it together. Democracy is not about government. It's about equipping people to solve their own problems. And we can do that. And I think that's the social media element of it. It's not about government. It's not that government doesn't have an important role to play, that does. But on the other hand, there's a huge community of folks out there who, if we're equipped to solve our own problems in a group gathering on a hangout like this is an opportunity to do that, then I think that we've got a great opportunity to pull a community together with the social media and equip ourselves to deal with the problems.
Right, and one of the conversations that we recently had was about the bike paths or the whole bike issue in Harrisburg, and what impressed me was that in one of the breakout sessions, a number of folks that were associated with various organizations promoting bicycling in the city, the entire night was about bike paths and about promoting bikes. Well, if the public can't figure this out or can't hear this, what good is it talking in a group? That's why this Hangout platform can be very useful. And I think our next show will be about the entire bike issue.
Yeah, there were actually a number of groups, and you picked that out. Rhonda was involved in one on food access, and that would be another great conversation. There's blight, crime, greening and water, trash, litter, and recycling, transportation, as you mentioned. So there are a lot of good conversations that we can have that'll draw in a whole lot more people than you can necessarily put in a room, and you can do it whenever you feel the need to be able to have a conversation. And you won't have talking heads. You won't have it so it's somebody talking at us. It'll be, we can do it so we can try to pull it together to talk with each other.
And can I interject with the conversation about bikes? We shouldn't be looking at the conversation about bikes just concerning recreational use and where bike paths are going throughout the certain areas of the city to make access to certain areas easier for people who may be commuting. There's a whole circle of people within the community that need bicycles and use bicycles as a way of life, as a way of transportation. They're not just used for recreational purposes, for traveling through green spaces, even though that's really important. But we also have to keep in mind that there are people that need this mode of transportation to get to work, and that they have just as much of a right to have their say as far as safety issues as anyone else in the city. We're not just talking about, though I don't want to single any part of the section, any section of the city out, but a lot of the conversation around bikes had centered around the people that lived in Midtown and whether the Front Street bike path was going to be a good idea or not. And I think when we look at transportation issues in the city as a whole, and in particular, because that just happened to be something that was of interest lately, bicycles, we need to look at who's using them, why, and how to make it as safe as possible for everyone, for every purpose. So that's a conversation to have.
I'm sorry, Rhonda. That's very important. I had a conversation today with someone who was concerned about the 4-foot rule, where cars need to give a 4-foot right of way, a space between themselves and bicycles. And there are a lot of people in this community who use bicycles as a means of being able to get to work and back. And I think that when we start to talk about transportation, which is where this conversation began at the Zembo Shrine with the Harrisburg Thriving Together, was part of a transportation conversation. We need to look at walking, we need to look at biking, we need to look at how we have a balanced transportation system that really does meet the needs of this community and their ability to get around, and not just the commuters that are driving fast down a couple of our roads and kind of cutting our community up in pieces.
And that just segues into the whole area of crime in the city, because what really impressed me about that breakout session was the statistics that these folks cited about the correlation between bikers, walkers, and the level of crime in a city. The more people you have out, the less crime. And that's going to be good for Harrisburg in the long run. But we're going to have a show dealing with bikes. And that, I think, is coming up and will be coming up in January sometime. And if there's any organization that would like to be part of these hangouts, would like to participate in the film strip below here, we invite you to contact either Nevin, and Nevin, what you might want to put out your email address.
Well, it's N-M-I-N-D-L-I-N Nevin, the N for Nevin, and Mindlin, my last name, N Mindlin at netzero, netzero.net. And I'd be very. You can find me on Facebook. You can also find me on Twitter.
As
you can
well,
find me on Google.
right, and you can also comment and put your comments in the event on the events page as well as on the YouTube page where this content will reside for replays.
Yeah, and I hope that we can get to a conversation revolving around the group that Rhonda is helping to convene on the food access, because that's also a very important element to many people in this community, especially with the high poverty rate. And it's more than just doing gardens. It really has to do with making sure that there's food available and it's out in the community and it's a healthy food. And I think those are things that we need to pay attention to as we grow a healthier, economically stronger community.
Well, we're at the 20-minute mark, and first of all, I want to thank the both of you for being on this launch show. Democracy is everyone. HBG thriving together. And we're going to go on. We're going to have some more Hangouts. The announcements will be made here as well as inside of Facebook and on Twitter. And again, anyone that would like to participate, any organizations are welcome. And I'd like to invite you guys to make a closing statement.
Rhonda, please. Want to start? I'm happy to if you'd like, but I thought.
Go ahead, Nevin.
What's that?
I said that. Well, I'd just like to say that it was a pleasure to be a part of this inaugural launch of Harrisburg Thriving Together's Google Hangouts. I hope that we get a wide audience. There's going to be, I'm sure, a lot of very pertinent conversations to be had where we each can speak to each other in person and come together to get some solutions to our neighborhood problems and our city as a whole. So it was a pleasure to be here this evening. I look forward to watching and participating in other Hangouts. Maybe not as a participant on the panel, but I will definitely be a regular member of the audience and taking part in these very, very important conversations. So thank you very much for having me tonight.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Yeah, well, I want to say it was a pleasure being on with Rhonda and with Scott, and I'm glad we've gotten this started. Democracy really is everyone, and I think it's really important that the community have the opportunity to have a voice and to work together in solving our problems and empowering ourselves. I think that's really what democracy is all about. And our community needs to rebuild a community, and the only way you do that is if you interact with each other and work with each other. And there's a lot of energy that is out there interested in doing that. The Harrisburg Thriving Together event on October the 23rd was an excellent example of that and a really great launch. And I'm looking forward to a lot of other good conversations as well. Thank you, Scott, for being a wonderful host for our group.
You're welcome, Nevin, and I look forward to some more Hangouts. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.